and welcome to this edition of Trader Talk TV. Today we're talking about mobile, specifically the mobile app ecosystem, mobile app ad ecosystem. And today we've got Todd from Nexage in the office. Todd, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you.
And before we just go in and talk about this huge blind spot for ad tech and the advertising industry as a whole, Todd, give us an overview of what Nexage does.
Great.
What are you and what you do?
Sure. So my name's Todd Tran. I'm the European Managing Director for Nexage. And Nexage is the leading premium mobile ad exchange. So in the world of ad exchanges, there is a very separate mobile ad exchange ecosystem. And we're one of the largest globally, and we're the only one that's exclusively focused on premium inventory from premium publishers.
Thanks, Todd. So last year, apparently, £1 billion was spent on mobile advertising. And if you split that out, 500 million was search and 500 million was display. Of that 500 million, probably 450, between 400 and 450 was in-app advertising. Now, who's buying the in-app advertising and what's going on in this ecosystem? Todd, what is going on? Why do we know about this big ecosystem?
Great. Yeah, so it's interesting because everybody's talking about the fact that we live in a cross-screen world.
Yes.
And publishers and advertisers want to look at the world in terms of different screens and planning for different screens, and we think that is very much the right approach.
Yeah.
However, currently today, the different screens still live in fairly different ecosystems.
Yeah.
And in particular mobile, and I'm talking here about smartphones and tablets, they have their own world and their own ecosystem that is very different than desktop display.
Yeah.
So what's happening is that in terms of consumer usage, if you look at the fact that today, already on a global basis, there is more time spent on mobile media than actually on television and on desktop.
Okay.
That has already happened. Now, what's interesting is that 85% of the time spent on mobile media is actually in apps, and 15% is on the mobile web or browser. Now, this is the critical difference from the desktop, because the app ecosystem is actually completely different than the browser ecosystem. Yeah. It's based on a different operating system, a different technology. There are no cookies in the app ecosystem. Yeah. And when you look at the biggest media companies that exist in the app ecosystem, they're very, very different than the media and publishers that exist on desktop. So
we're talking about a new breed of digital media publisher coming into this ecosystem effectively.
Yes. There are a few publishers from desktop that are very large, and they have transitioned over to mobile quite well. Google, Facebook, Twitter being some examples. But for the most part, all the other publishers tend to be app publishers. So for example, Rovio, the makers of Angry Birds, has over 2 billion downloads of their app globally. Yeah. You have companies like iHandy that does flashlight or torchlight apps. You have Pandora in the US that has radio apps, etc., etc.
We're talking probably here a new breed of digital media publishers, but it's almost like utility elements, like flashlights, Shazam, which is sort of a music recognition site, Spotify, all these types of apps. Well, Spotify's a bad example because obviously it's a premium subscription based, but like most of these are utility apps. There's a new breed of publishers. So how does the existing publishers play in this space? I mean, can you map out, what we want to first do is map out exactly why buyers are buying in-app. What's specific about in-app inventory? Why is all this money going to in-app? So if we could get an idea of why the Kings and other gaming companies or app companies are spending so much money in-app advertising.
Sure. So maybe to start off with, I mean, we at Nexage, we have two groups of publishers. Yeah. And we categorize into groups. One is the app publishers. Yeah. And the other is what we call the multi-screen publishers. Yeah. Right. And multi-screen publishers are typical desktop or traditional media publishers that you all know. And the app publishers are the guys who are app native. They started in apps, right? And roughly we have half of our publishers sitting here and half of our publishers sitting here.
Yeah.
But in terms of inventory, this probably represents 85%
Of the purchases on the
of
exchange.
our inventory.
Right, okay.
Right, whereas this represents maybe 15%.
Okay.
Right, so, and this, by the way, mirrors consumer time spent.
Right.
So consumer time spent is 85% here and 15% here. Now what's happening here is that these publishers, because they're app publishers, almost all of their inventory is app. So app traffic. These guys have mobile web and app. So MWeb and app. And currently tends to have a bit more mobile web inventory. But if you added this app inventory with that app inventory,
Yeah.
it's large majority app.
Okay.
An app-dominated world.
Right.
And as you mentioned, most mobile advertising spend is happening on apps.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why app inventory is very popular is, well, first of all, it's a better user experience.
Yeah.
In the app world.
Yeah.
Right? That's number one. So I would say the user experience is a big positive.
Yeah.
Right. Secondly, is data. And obviously in programmatic, it's all about data.
Absolutely.
Right. And what happens with an app is that you can actually get a device ID, which, by the way, does not exist in desktop.
Yeah.
Right. So that's why that's one of the critical differences between the two different ecosystems. And on mobile, particularly apps, there are no cookies. Right. So this effectively is the cookie. Right, of the mobile world, of the mobile app world.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Right. And in addition, with mobile, because people are mobile, location is actually very important. So you actually get lat long, which is GPS location data, right? That comes with an app, right? Now, if you as an app publisher pass these two pieces of data, these are the two most demanded piece of data by the buyers of mobile advertising on programmatic, because they want a cookie and they want to know where people are. And knowing people are where people are is not only helpful for location-based advertising, but if I knew a lot about where you were and where you are over time, I can actually derive a lot of profile information about you.
So you could segment that kind of information against the user, basically.
Yes.
And then target them with relevant advertising, wherever, so during the purchase process or down the purchase funnel, effectively.
Yes. So effectively, what you're getting here with the location data is one, location-based, advertising called LVA. But two is you can start to profile the user. You know potentially where they live, and therefore which postcode it is, and therefore what car they're likely to drive.
It's all anonymous, obviously.
It's all anonymous, data, so privacy compliant.
This is obviously the deciding factor for a lot of buyers. So this is effectively the cookie, the double-click cookie for mobile. Obviously, there's two different devices. Obviously, there's Apple and there's Android. But between them, you can derive a picture of a user and target the user, and actually measure as well against the success of the campaigns.
Yes.
And maybe even do proper attribution on that as well.
Exactly.
Right.
Think of it as a cookie.
Okay.
Right. This is the cookie of the mobile world.
Right.
And if you look at the type of people that are advertising on mobile, so the buyers of mobile advertising.
I was going to ask about a typical buyer. Who is the typical buyers at the minute? Like
so, up until say this year, the majority of buyers of mobile advertising are actually apps. Okay. They're app developers trying to drive downloads of their app or trying to drive traffic to their app, right? And I would say that represented probably more than 50% of all mobile advertising up until the end of last year. What we started to see, though, at the end of last year was a shift. The shift of the buyer becoming more and more non-app advertisers,
Yeah.
meaning brands.
Okay.
Right. So these are e-commerce brands like, for example, eBay, Amazon, etc. But also traditional brands like P&G and Unilever. Right. And they may be buying the mobile advertising for performance campaigns still predominantly, but they're also increasingly buying it more for brand awareness, you know, and impact type campaigns, right? And that shift on the Nexage exchange has already shifted to well over 50% of our exchange is now coming from brands and not the app developers. And this is because out of all the exchanges, we are the premium exchange, so it's expected that we would, you know, get the initial brand spend first.
So obviously, brands want impactful ad units on the available on the exchange. I mean, I take it that there's a standard sort of small banner at the bottom of the. If you look at a typical sort of app, there's sort of a banner at the bottom here. But I mean, brands are obviously going to look for more impactful creatives. So what do you currently offer? What's sort of on the horizon? Are we looking at video, rich media? What are we looking at basically?
Yeah, sure. So so there are actually various different ad units that are available on mobile, and it also depends on whether it's a smartphone or a tablet.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So if you look at a typical smartphone, the typical ad unit that people are familiar with is the banner.
Yeah.
Right. The 320 by 50 banner.
Yeah.
Right. Now, there are roughly, I would say, two categories of these type of banners. There's your static banner, and then there's the rich media banner.
Okay.
Right? The rich media banner is when you tap on it, it actually expands to full screen.
Okay.
And then within that screen, it almost acts like it's an app.
Oh, an app within an app.
Yeah, so it's actually very rich, immersive experience, and in many cases actually better than desktop.
And this is, you can buy this via programmatic?
You can buy this programmatic.
Okay.
Yes, actually a very large percentage of our inventory in our exchange is rich media enabled.
Okay, really?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. So so that's the banner and the rich media banner that can expand to full screen. There's of course the MPU, which is a very well-known ad unit from desktop.
Yeah.
It just so happens that that exact ad unit actually works on mobile devices, and that's actually often purchased because they've already created that banner or that unit for desktop, and they're just moving it over to. So
is that available in app as well? Because I have seen the Shazam app, which has a typical banner here. It's actually really well laid out. So you know, the utility apps are quite nice because there's not as much text and it's not very busy, but you've got like your function here and you've got your banner here, and it actually looks pretty decent. Like.
Yes, and I mean, if that's within the actual app itself, and it's almost, I think a lot of people start calling that a native type app.
Native, it looks native actually.
Yeah, it looks native. It's probably the same size because that it just takes advantage of what's already created. But this MPU here is actually an interstitial. Yeah. You know, in between the pages, and there's that, and then there's of course the full screen interstitial. Okay. You know, that takes over the entire screen, and that's a, you know, 480, you know, by 300, and that.
So you mean you flick in between functions on the app itself, so when you go on the screens it appears. I haven't actually seen any of that though.
Or when you launch the app at the beginning. Right, and it appears in between levels in a game. Right. You know, there's various different places that you can place an interstitial. I mean, you have to be careful as a publisher not to do too many of these, so that you're
because it kills user experience.
But place and timed correctly, it's very impactful. Now, any of these sizes are rich media capable. Right. Right. So you can actually make them rich media, and you can, you know, have within the ad itself, you can spin a car around, open its door with your finger, and do all of these things. Right. So that's what makes it very rich, and I would argue that it's actually richer experience and engaging experience than desktop because of the touch-based and app-like functionality of rich media. Right. Right. And in terms of rich media, but in terms of video, I mean, is that an option as well? I mean, like, yes.
if you do the installations, could you actually have some kind of video playing as well before the app loads, or is it a totally different? Is it more pre-roll, post-roll type thing, or
yes.
how does that work?
So the two very common types of video ads that we have are video pre-roll and video interstitials, which are at full screen with a video in it. Yeah. Right, and they act exactly the same. The pre-roll acts exactly the same as a desktop. Right. In that it's inserted before the video.
And is that something you do at Nexage as well?
Yes, so that is available on the exchange to be purchased, and it is one of the fastest growing ad unit on mobile in our exchange today. In fact, we have a significant amount of demand for it, and we're onboarding a lot of video inventory as we speak.
All right, Todd, we're actually pressed for time today, but we could talk about this for hours. But thanks for giving us sort of an overview of sort of that sort of blind spot for ad tech and bringing us through the app ecosystem and sort of ad units and the types of publishers and the types of advertisers. So, Todd, thanks very much.
Great, thank you.
And we'll see you next time.